Right. So we've gotten a ton of requests to do a deep dive on this one.
Oh, yeah.
Ramadan,
Huge topic.
it is. And it's interesting because, we've talked a lot about fasting on the show
For sure.
and the benefits,
Hmm.
but there's just something about Ramadan
Yeah.
that just seems to resonate with people.
Absolutely. And it's not even just for those who observe it.
Right. And that's kind of what we want to get into today.
Oh.
We're looking at this YouTube podcast script called Unlocking the Power of Ramadan 3: Surprising Benefits.
Podcast man, right?
Podcast man. Yeah, he's got some really interesting points, and they're not the typical, fasting is good for you kind of thing.
Right. It's deeper than that.
It's deeper than that.
Yeah.
And even for people who maybe aren't, religious or don't practice Islam,
I think there's a lot to learn here.
I think there's a lot to be gained from understanding this.
For sure.
So what are some of the key takeaways that the podcast man hits on?
Well, he focuses on three main things. Spiritual growth, mental clarity, and then stronger communities.
And those are all, pretty powerful in and of themselves.
Absolutely.
But he kind of connects them in a way that I hadn't really thought about before.
Yeah, and I'm curious to hear your take on it as well.
Yeah, well, let's dive into the first one, spiritual growth.
Okay.
Podcast man talks about fasting as this kind of mental reset.
A mental reset, yeah.
What are your thoughts on that?
I mean, I think it makes a lot of sense, right? Like you're consciously choosing to abstain from, food and drink.
Basic needs.
Basic needs. Yeah, your body is craving it, but you're choosing not to.
And for a whole month.
For a whole month. Yeah, it requires a lot of self-discipline.
And wouldn't you say that self-discipline that you develop during Ramadan can actually kind of bleed into
absolutely.
other
Areas of your life?
Yeah, it's like building a muscle, right?
Yeah.
The more you practice self-control in one area.
Yeah, the stronger it becomes overall.
And I think that's something that a lot of people struggle with in today's world, right? Like there's so much temptation,
constant stimulation,
instant gratification. And so to have this period where you're really focusing on
intentionally depriving yourself.
Yeah.
I mean, it really forces you to confront your desires and figure out like what's truly important.
Yeah, what you can actually live without.
Exactly.
What you actually need versus what you just want.
And what's interesting is that there's actually some research showing that fasting can increase empathy.
Like scientifically.
Yeah, like there's a correlation there.
Wow.
And it kind of makes sense when you think about it, right? Like when you experience hunger yourself, you become more aware of what it's like for people who are experiencing that on a regular basis.
You can relate on a different level.
Exactly. And I think that's a really powerful aspect of Ramadan.
Yeah, that's fascinating. And it kind of speaks to the whole idea of like stepping outside of yourself and connecting with something larger.
Absolutely.
Podcast man also mentioned that Ramadan is a time for increased prayer and reflection.
Right.
How do those practices kind of contribute to that spiritual growth?
Well, they provide an opportunity to like really connect with your faith on a deeper level. You're taking time to think about your values, to contemplate, the meaning of life.
It's almost like a forced mindfulness in a way.
Yeah, like a built-in retreat in a sense.
Yeah. And I think that's something that a lot of us could probably benefit from.
Oh, for sure.
Regardless of our religious beliefs, just that
pause.
That time to reflect.
Yeah, to step back from the everyday chaos and just be.
Yeah, and really just kind of sit with yourself and think about things.
Exactly.
So that's spiritual growth. That's a pretty big one.
Yeah, that's a huge one.
All right, so moving on to the next benefit that Podcast Man talks about is mental clarity.
Okay.
And he actually calls Ramadan a detox for body and mind.
Interesting.
Is there any scientific basis for that?
There actually is. There's quite a bit of research emerging on the cognitive benefits of fasting.
Really?
Yeah, and one of the key things that happens when you fast is this process called autophagy. Autophagy. Yeah, it's a big word.
Yeah, break that down for us.
So basically, it's like your body's spring cleaning system.
Okay.
So when you fast, your body starts to clean up shop. It gets rid of damaged cells, unnecessary proteins.
So it's like hitting the reset button on a cellular level.
Exactly. It's like detoxing from the inside out.
So it's not just a spiritual cleanse, it's a physical one too.
Absolutely. It's both. And some studies are suggesting that this process can actually lead to improvements in focus, cognitive function, even creativity.
That's wild. I mean, it's like hitting the refresh button on your habits as well.
Totally, yeah, because fasting can disrupt those ingrained patterns, like those mindless habits that we all have.
Yeah.
And it gives you a chance to kind of step back and reevaluate and form new, healthier ones.
And I think that's something that, again, a lot of people are looking for, right? Like, how do I
break those bad habits?
How do I break those bad habits? How do I create better ones?
Yeah.
And maybe fasting is a key part of that.
It could be. It's definitely something to explore.
All right. So last but not least, we've got this community aspect of Ramadan.
Right.
That podcast man talks about. And he really emphasizes the coming together.
The gathering.
The gathering of family and friends to break the fast each evening.
Yeah, the iftar meals.
Yeah, the iftar meals. What is it about those shared meals and stories that really strengthens those community bonds?
I mean, just imagine, right? You've gone through this whole day of fasting.
Together.
Yeah, and then you come together with your loved ones and you break that fast together. You share a meal. You share stories.
It's like a collective experience.
Yeah, it is, and it creates this really powerful sense of unity and belonging.
And it's not just about the food. Right, it's about those connections.
Absolutely. It's about the traditions, the shared history, the passing down of recipes from generation to generation.
It's really keeping those traditions alive.
Yeah, and strengthening the social fabric of the community.
Yeah, and we can't forget about the emphasis on charity during Ramadan.
Oh, that's a huge part of it.
What is it about this month that really inspires that generosity?
Well, I think it's a time when people are really reflecting on their own blessings. You're making sacrifices. You're experiencing hunger.
Yeah.
And it makes you more aware of the needs of others.
So it's like that empathy that we were talking about before.
Exactly. It all ties together.
It all comes full circle.
Yeah. And so there's this natural impulse to want to give back.
To share your blessings.
To share your blessings, yeah. And to spread kindness.
So we've got spiritual growth, mental clarity, and community bonding.
3 powerful benefits.
And as podcast man pointed out, they're not exclusive to any one religion or belief system.
Right. They're universal principles.
They're universal principles that anyone can benefit from.
Absolutely.
And so as we wrap up this deep dive, I want to leave you with this question. How could you incorporate some of these Ramadan principles, mindfulness, gratitude, community engagement, into your own life?
That's a good question.
Regardless of your background, regardless of your beliefs.
Yeah. How can we take these lessons and apply them to our own lives?
It's definitely something to think about. And until next time, stay curious.
Stay curious.